Hello and welcome to my channel today. I'm Teresa, and for those of you that are new to my channel, welcome. Thank you for joining me. And for those of you that are regular visitors, well, thank you for coming back today. Those of you that are regular visitors will notice that it is not Saturday morning, which is my usual time for uploading a video. It is indeed Friday afternoon here in the UK, but that's because this week's video is a special one. It's a collaboration. So it's not going out at my usual time. This has replaced my weekly video, though. There will not be one Saturday morning. This is my offering for this week. Now, this collaboration was organised by the lovely Nina Ribena, and I will pop links to her YouTube channel down below. I will also link to the other ladies that are joining in this collaboration. So when you've watched this video, please do take the time to go and check out what they've made as well. We've all worked very hard to create some really interesting and varied projects for you. So yeah, please do take the time, especially if you're at home, self-isolating, maybe working from home. You know, you want something uplifting and fun to watch, so please do check out the links below. Now, last year Nina Ribena was contacted by a company called, I'm going to say Onforu, I'm not entirely sure how it's meant to be pronounced, and they produced these bottle lights. Now, they've been quite the thing for the last 12 months or so. It's obviously a fake cork with batteries in, and then a string of lights. There's 20 lights on each of these strings, so it's a good generous length. I will pop links below to where you can purchase them. They're available through Amazon in Europe and the UK. I don't believe they're available in the US, but if you are in the US, there are other companies that sell these. There are stores that sell these when you're able to get back out to the stores. I don't envisage anybody having a problem getting hold of a string of bottle lights at the moment. So Nina very kindly put out a call. Was there any fellow YouTubers that would like to collaborate with her and create some projects? And I was one of the lucky people that she picked to do this, and she very generously sent me 6 sets of lights. Now, I've used 4 of them. I still have these 2 left. Those I will use for a project at a future date. But my video today will show you the 4 bottles that I have here in front of me. And I appreciate this is a long video because there's 4 projects in it. I will also link in the description to the time that each project begins in the video. So if you want to skip ahead to one, watch one first. If you want to break it down and watch one in a session, you can easily find where the next one begins. The 4 projects that I have made are loosely based around a sort of magical ingredients theme. I'm not going to say exactly potion bottle, it's not quite that, but I wanted to show different techniques using different materials and just different ideas, different bottles, different containers, things that I had already got. So we have here, this is the Dragon's Blood bottle. This one here is the Vampire Venom. This beautiful one here is Fairy Wings. And this one here is the Mermaid Tears. So if you're interested in seeing what I used and how I created these, please go make yourself a cup of tea, settle down and sit and watch this lovely video. And as I say, when you've finished watching here, please check out the links to the ladies in the description below. We've all worked very hard to try and create something exciting and unique for you to watch. And especially at this difficult time, it's good to have something interesting and fun to take your mind off of events that are happening out in the world at the moment. So without further ado, I'm going to move these out of the way, and I'll be back with tutorial number 1. We're going to begin today with the Fairy Wings jar, and the jar that I'm using is this really nice dumpy shaped jar. It was from my local craft shop, wasn't a lot, a few pounds. Really liked the shape of it, especially because these wings have got some size to them, so I needed something that was quite wide. Now, the only thing here is that the hole in the top is considerably wider than the little cork, so I've had to make a foam collar to fit round so that it'll fit snugly in the top and stop the cork from dropping in. Now, I had these pieces of black foam from my local scrap store, I don't know what they were originally, whether they were some sort of packaging. I picked them up thinking they might be good for printing circles. But all I've done is just cut a slice off the end and then just cut out a rough circle from the middle to make a sort of donut shape. And I'm going to pop that onto the cork so that it'll fit snugly, as I say, and hold that cork in place. I need to do this first though, because once I've got the wings on the lights, it's not going to fit through. So I'm just going to thread my string of lights through the centre and then just push that up onto the bottom of this cork. And I can leave that there then. And then that'll be perfect. When I come to pop this into my jar, I can then just sort of squidge that in place and it'll hold it in the top nice and securely. The wings that I'm going to be using are these little printed acetate wings. These are part of the Tim Holtz Ideology range. And I've used some from this set. This was the first set he brought out, which were all these sort of fairy rings. Apologies for the reflection of the light. He then also brought out a set which had got butterfly wings in. And you'll see in here the ones that have got white printing on them are from the original set, and the ones with the black printing are from the butterfly set. But there's basically two designs in there, two styles of wings, and they come in different sizes, but these are the small ones and they're actually perfect. They fit through the hole in the top of my jar and they should look really, really nice. Before I attach these, however, to the lights, I want to add some colour, and I'm going to do that with alcohol inks. And I'm going to do this on all the projects that I'm sharing with you today. And for this one, I'm using Sunshine Yellow. You can use any brand of alcohol ink. You could indeed use like an alcohol marker, like a pro marker or something like that, although you might need to do a couple of layers, let it sort of dry and then build the colour up. I've tried this with some paler colours. It doesn't show so well, so it needs to be a fairly bright colour, obviously, because when the lights are on and they're bright, it sort of dilutes the colour that you've used. So today, as I say, I'm going to use Sunshine Yellow. So I've just got myself a bit of paper towel here, and I'm going to open up my string of lights. And then I'm going to literally just drop on a little bit of ink onto each of the lights. Now you can do it this way. You could pop some ink into a palette and then just paint it on with a brush. But I found it's reasonably easy just to put a little drop on each of the little blobs where the light is. And just have this paper towel to catch any drips underneath. It dries quite quickly, but you just might want to blot off any excess that there is. And then when we turn these on, and do that one-handed, instead of the lights being white like that, I don't know if it shows up too well, you can see there's a warmer, more yellow glow. So we've got a white one there and then one with the yellow on. It's quite obvious here in real life, not so easy to see on the camera. But hopefully it will just add a little bit more of a coloured glow once we've got the wings in place. So I'm going to go ahead and add a drop of alcohol ink to all of these and let it dry, and then we can stick the wings in place. So now we've got our string of yellow lights and they're all pretty much dry now. It doesn't take too long for the alcohol ink to dry. We're going to stick on the little wings, and I'm just going to glue these on with a little bit of Fabri-Tac glue just in the centre of the wings, gluing that onto where there's a little light. And the lights are kind of covered with a blob of glue, so one side's flatter than the other, and that'll be the side that I'm going to sort of stick it on. So it may be a little bit fiddly because I'm just going to have to wait a moment or two for each of these to dry. But I'm only going to need a little amount of glue. And then, as I say, just attach it where that light is on the string, and we can let that dry. So there's one. I'm just going to also alternate the design and shape of the wings as I go, so that they're not all the same ones next to each other. And again, just pressing it in place and giving it a few moments to grab and stick down before moving on to the next one. Once you've stuck all your little fairy wings on, you want to pop that aside to set, really. Give it 15-20 minutes or so, just to be sure that that glue's gone completely hard. And while that's happening, we can get on with putting a little bit of decoration onto the jar. I want my jar to have a sort of a natural feel, and so I'm going to be decorating with some little paper flowers. I've just got a selection of paper flowers here, and then I've got this decorative coloured sand, which I thought might be nice to sort of create almost a bit of a mossy effect around the bottom. And that I can apply with some gel medium, that'll stick that in place. I've also got some moss here, some reindeer moss, and I was thinking about maybe putting some of this around the top when I'm finished, just to hide that little rubber bung that we're putting in there and finish it off. I've also got some labels here. These are just some sticky labels, and I shall be probably writing something on that and sticking it on the jar. And to decorate, just to add a little bit further embellishment, I've had to dig through some jewellery making supplies, and I found some chain. This was just some cheap chain that I've had for a long time, and some little assorted keys. I thought they might be quite nice to sort of maybe drape around the top and dangle off. And to attach those, I've just got a selection of jump rings here. Got my pliers for attaching those as well. But to start with, we're going to put some of this coloured sand around the bottom, just to create a bit of a more natural effect. So to do this, I'm just going to dab on some gel medium. I don't want a lot, I just want a bit of a hint of it around the bottom. And then once you've done that, you can sprinkle some of this sand on. This is why I've just got a piece of scrap paper down underneath that'll catch any of the bits. And as you sprinkle it on, it'll stick in place, and this gel medium will dry completely clear. So I'm beginning with the green because I want it to be predominantly green for a sort of mossy effect. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of the black and the cream. And then once you've pretty much covered it, just gently pat it on, just to make sure it is stuck in there in that gel medium. You can always pick up a little bit of your excess off the paper if you've got any areas where there's still some of the gel medium exposed. And hopefully when that's dry, that'll just give a little bit of an aged natural effect to it. While that's drying, we can continue to decorate the jar, and I'm going to move on to using the chain across the top. Now these are actual little necklaces with a trigger clasp at the top. If you've just got chain, you can just use a jump ring to attach it at the right size. But what I'm going to do is measure how wide it is around the neck, which is something like that. And I'm going to cut my piece of chain using my wire cutters. And then I've got the choice. I can either take this little tab that's on the other end of this chain off, or I could just use a jump ring. But I think I may as well use this, being as I've got it here. And I should be able, I'm not entirely sure, yep, should be able to pull that off there and attach it to the last link in this little piece that I've cut off. So might need to just open that up a little bit more. So just difficult to get it to focus because I'm working quite close to the camera. Just threaded that through there and close that up. And what we've essentially got there now is a very tiny chain, which should fit quite nicely around the top of here. And I know it's a little bit fiddly to do, but yeah, that's going to fit perfectly. Now I don't want to actually fix it in place just yet, but what I will do is join it up so I've got this little piece here that's going to be a collar that's going to fit around the neck. And I want to have some bits looped so that they dangle down the sides. And then I can hang some of these little keys in there as well. So I'm going to do that by just cutting some lengths of chain that will drape to a nice sort of size, like so. And I'm going to attach them using jump rings. So I shall get all this prepared and I'll show you what that looks like when that's done. So we're going to take a jump ring and using 2 pairs of pliers, just twist it to open it up. You can see that. I'm going to take one of the lengths of chain that we cut and thread that on, like so. I'm going to take one of the little key charms that I've got and thread that on. Another of the pieces of chain and thread that on. And then our little collar piece with the clasp, I'm going to attach this to one of the links near the middle. And when it's attached, it'll dangle like so. So what you want to do with the next one is take the end of this piece of chain and attach it to another loop with a key and the next piece of chain, so that we'll create a little looped dangle effect. And that's really much easier to do if you can lie it down on the table and do it rather than try and hold it in front of a camera. And as you can see, it's just also again difficult because of the angle of the camera, but just draped randomly. Just nice to have a little bit of decoration around the outside of that bottle there. So my sand's almost dry. My fairy wings are actually dry now, so we can pop those in and then put a little bit of decoration around the top with some flowers and some of the moss. So as I say, I think all the glue seems pretty secure now on my fairy wings. And I kind of, I'm going to try and spiral it as I pop it in. Just so that they fill the jar quite nicely. Just being careful as I pop those in through the neck of that jar. And just trying to even out any of the creases that are in the wire from when it was folded up. Quite a long process this, as there are 20 lights on these strings. They're really, really generous size. So there's our little fairy wings in place in the jar. That little rubber bunged in there quite nice and tight, so that's not going anywhere. And I'm going to pop some of this moss around the top and just a little cluster of flowers just to pretty it up. They're fairy wings, and I think it would be nice just to add a floral element in there. Easiest way to do this, I think, is going to be with a glue gun because they're quite bulky embellishments. I'm just going to take some sections of this reindeer moss and apply a little hot glue just around the glass here. I don't want to glue the cork in case I need to be able to change the batteries. But just pop in a little bit of glue around the top of this jar. Just to add a bit of the moss. Just trimming off, easy just to pull a bit off and reshape it. So that just adds a little decoration to the top. It ties in with the greenery that we've got at the bottom. And I can just go ahead and pop some flowers on now as well. So I'm just going to cut off the stems. I don't need the wire stems. And I'm deciding what's going to be the front. I think that's going to be my front. So applying a good blob of glue onto the back of my flower. I'm going to tuck that in place round the lip. And I'm going to add in a couple of these smaller rosebuds as well, just for some extra decoration. So there's my little floral decoration at the top done. And all that remains to be done now is to add our label. And as I say, I'm going to use one of these little vial labels. You could just cut a piece of card out and just trim it around the edge with a bit of black pen. I'm just going to use some archival ink and a little alphabet stamp to stamp my words onto my label. So that's our finished little label. Just going to give that a moment to dry, and then I can peel that off and stick it onto the jar. And that is our finished first jar, and they're so pretty, really pretty, look like they're flying around in there, and that warm yellow glow just really lifts those lights. So I'm going to set this aside and I'll be back with all the bits and pieces that we need for the next one. The second bottle we're going to do today is going to be our bottle of vampire venom. This was actually a vase, and it came with one of those lucky, the twirly bamboos. It's like a bamboo and it spirals at the top, and it came in this sort of bulb shaped vase, and I've kept the vase because, as all good crafters do, you think that was too good to get rid of. And our vampire venom that is going to be green in colour, so I've gone ahead and pre-coloured my lights just the same way that we did with the fairy jar, putting a little dot of alcohol ink onto each one. And for this I've used Bottle, this nice dark green, because as I say, they tend to come out a little paler in colour once the light's on. So Bottle, being a very dark green, has given me enough sort of intensity for what I want today. The other things that I've gathered together is some twine. This is just like rustic garden twine. I've got a little wooden skull embellishment. This was part of a Halloween range from Hobbycraft, I believe. Came in a pack with lots of different sizes. And I've found some little, these are actually shark's teeth. And again, these were in my jewellery stash because they come with a little wire wrap around the top and a loop on them. But I thought they'd be perfect for vampire fangs. So I'm probably going to dangle a couple of these as well. Why not? I've also got my little adhesive labels that I used on the fairy wings jar. May well use one of those again. And I've got my Fabri-Tac glue. So the first thing I can do is we can actually go ahead and just pop these lights in, because now that they're coloured, that's it. That's as far as they're going to go. And we're just going to be decorating the outside of the jar. So we may as well pop them in and have done with it. So once again, as you feed them in, just making sure there's no sharp bends in the wire from when they were bundled up as best I can. Obviously, they're all going to sort of squidge down in there. This is rather a long string of lights to get into what is quite a small space inside this vase. So there's our string of lights in there, just fed nicely down in there. And what we're going to do is decorate the neck of this tall vase by wrapping some of this twine around it. So I can just turn the lights off for now. And I'm going to begin at the top and just holding about an inch or so of twine, just pointing down. It's a little bit tricky just to get it started. I'm going to start wrapping around, and we can go over that little tail end that we've left, and that'll do away with the need to actually glue it in place at the top. So you can either wrap it around or you can twist the bottle, which, you know, if it's more convenient for you to roll the bottle in one hand. What we want to basically do though is keep that twine nicely butted up so that there's no gaps in between it. And we're going to continue to do that until we've really reached the bottom of the neck. We're going down to about this point here. So I'll keep wrapping this around and I'll come back to you when I reach that point. Now that I've reached the bottom of the neck of this vase, I've just trimmed the twine off. I'm just going to apply a little bit of Fabri-Tac just along the bottom so that I can press the end of that twine in place and just stick it down. And just give that a moment or two to grab it, and then that'll be stuck down nicely. And that looks really quite pretty. Now, I do want to add some extra embellishment to this, much as I really do like this wrapped effect here, and I know I am going to be popping something on top as an embellishment. I was thinking of maybe crisscrossing something else just for a bit extra interest, and I've got this here is some thin leather thonging. It's about 1 to 2 millimeters, 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter, and I was thinking about, as I say, just sort of crisscrossing that around just for a little bit extra interest. So I'm going to try and decide the easiest, what's going to be the neatest way. If I leave myself a bit of an end, then I can always tie it off. But I was thinking if I spiral down and then across and back up again, and then I could tie that at the back, and then that little embellishment will fit in there. And I think it just breaks up that the colour of the twine. So I'm going to trim that off there, and just going to tie this at the back, and I'm going to do it off camera because it's just going to be a little bit easier for me to just get the bottle held in position and tie it, and I'll be right back when I've done that. So there we have it, just crisscrossed up, and I've just wrapped it back round the top and just tied it in a knot. But it was much easier for me to do that off camera than try and hold it in position. So next I'm going to apply this wooden embellishment, and I'd considered, you know, trying to decide, do I want to put something on it? Do I want to colour it in any way? And I'm thinking maybe a little bit of Gilding Wax. So this is a little, this is some of the Pebeo Gilding Wax actually. It's just got it in a small pot here. I'm thinking maybe just to add a little bit of shine. I don't want this to be overly fancy, but then again I do want it to have some interest. And there, I think it just adds a little bit of something to it. Just makes it look like we've made a little bit more effort rather than just sticking it on as it was. And again, I'm going to use Fabri-Tac for this. Fabri-Tac should stick this down, no problem at all. Could use the hot glue gun. But just going to apply some glue in a line down the middle, because obviously we're going onto a curved surface, so the middle is where it's going to get stuck down. And then just position that on there like so, and give that a moment to dry. While that's drying, I'm just going to go and wash this off my hands, and then we can get ready to do the finishing touches. So now that that's glued in place, that's nice and firm and secure, I want to attach these little shark's teeth. Now these come with a little wire hanger on them. So I've got myself some silver wire, which will match the wire that's on there. This was just from a set from the Works here, an assortment of colours. I would quite fancy using one of the coloured ones, but the fact that these have already got a silver wire on, I'm going to stick with that. I've got some more of my twine, and what I'm going to do is thread the twine through the loop and just take it back up a little bit, and then wrap a bit of wire around the bottom there just to secure it. I don't want to tie it in a knot, and I just thought wrapping a bit of wire around will just tie in quite nicely with the fixing that's already on the shark's tooth. So I'm going to do that for all three of them, and then we'll be ready to attach them to the bottle. So I've cut a piece of the wire just a couple of inches long, and it's really quite soft wire. And I'm just going to take one end and wrap it round reasonably tightly, and then just using my fingers, just wrap it round a couple of times to secure the end of that twine, so we can't really see the join. And then if you just want to be sure that there's no sharp ends poking out, just go over it lightly with your pliers just to squish it down. But that's just attached that as a little dangle, just finishes it off a little bit better than a knot. So I'm going to do all three of those, and we will then attach them to the bottle. So my shark's teeth, or vampire fangs as they're now going to be, are attached to my pieces of twine, and I've just sort of arranged them so that they're hanging in a sort of staggered way, one below the other. And I want them to, if I can just do this again, difficult in front of the camera, I want them to be hanging down the side like so. So where my fingers are, I'm going to tie a knot, and this knot is then going to sit sort of here at the lip, and I can tuck the loose end inside and use the cork to hold it in place. And that'll also help keep the cork wedged in, because it's quite slippy. With it being plastic, it's quite slippery. So tied my knot, I'm going to trim the ends a bit. I don't need them to be that long, so I'm going to trim them to about 2 inches. It's going to go on the inside. Lift the cork out, and then replace that cork with the knot just there at the side, and our little teeth will dangle down the side of the bottle like so. And when we turn the light on, you light up all green inside, which is really nice. So all that remains to be done now is to put the label on. I'm going to use another one of these self-adhesive vial labels, and I'm hoping that my stamp set isn't too big, that I'll be able to put Vampire Venom on. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp that in the same way that I did for the fairy wings, and I'll pop it on the bottle and I'll be right back. And here is our finished Vampire Venom bottle. Really happy with how that turned out. Love this rustic effect with the twine. Little sticker on there. I used a slightly narrower sticker this time than I did on the last one, because it's a smaller size bottle, but very happy with that. Happy that I found the shark's teeth when I was looking through my jewellery supplies, because I think they're just a really cool finishing effect for that one. So that's bottle number 2. I'll clear this lot out of the way and we will move on to the third one today. The next bottle that we're going to decorate is going to be our Dragon's Blood bottle. And for this, I've got this nice chunky square bottle. This was an amaretto bottle. Cleaned it all off, got all the labels off. And my string of lights I have coloured with a red alcohol ink this time. I've used the watermelon, which is a nice bright pinky red. Just put a drop on the lights as I did with the previous ones and left that to dry. And that's why I'm covered in little red dots, including on my top here. But never mind. So those are all done, and I can pop those lights to one side while we get on with decorating the jar. And to do this, I've got this lovely resin dragon. This was from Artful Days. They're not expensive, these resins. And it was just perfect size-wise to pop on the front of this lovely bottle. So I'm going to be painting that with some acrylic paint. And I've just got a selection of paints here that I'm going to use. I've also got some gesso, because I'm just going to give it a coat of white gesso before I paint it. The resin's quite a slippery surface, and I always find gesso is a good base before popping some paint on. I've got some black cord here. This is just some sort of nylon cord, sort of thing that you would thread a pendant on. And I'm thinking about just popping a bit of that around the neck of this bottle, just to disguise the sort of the screw top and everything on there. I've also got one of these fancy like a nameplate. These are from the Ideology range. I think I've got the packet here, just bear with me. Yeah, so these are like ornate plates. They come in 2 designs. There's this square design and then the oval one. And I'm thinking about mounting that up at the top here, because I'm not going to have room on the front really to put one of my sticky labels like I did on the previous 2. And I want to be able to label this bottle. So I was thinking about attaching it at the top here and having a piece of card or paper behind there with Dragon's Blood stamped on it. So I've got those. The other thing that I've got is a couple more alcohol inks. I've got the watermelon that I used on the lights. I've also got cranberry and I've got sunshine yellow. And I've got a little applicator with a felt pad on it. And I'm going to add some colour around the sides of this bottle. So this bottle has already got a sort of a texture around it, and I thought about just adding some colour on there, as well as the fact that we're going to have the coloured lights in. I thought that might be quite nice. But the first thing I want to do is to paint this resin dragon, because I want to paint it and obviously allow that to dry before I can attach it to the bottle. So I've got some white gesso here in a palette, and I'm just going to give a coat over the entire surface of this resin dragon. And as I say, this will just make it easier to paint on. It doesn't take too long to dry, and it doesn't need to be a particularly thick coat. I'm not worrying about the back because I'm not going to see that. We're not going to be looking at the bottle from the back. That's just going to be glued in place onto the bottle when we're finished. Now that my gesso's dry, you can give that a quick dry with a heat tool, but just bear in mind the resin just softens a little when it gets warm, so just be careful how you handle it if you are drying it with a heat tool. I'm ready to paint it, so I've washed my brush out and I've got a couple of shades of paint here. These are just a few sort of red colours that I like. I've got Pyrrole Red, Quinacridone Red and Quinacridone Violet, but it really doesn't matter. I'm just using what I happen to have. And I want this whole bottle to be a sort of a red theme, so that's why I'm painting him red. And I'm going to start with the sort of lighter of the 2 colours, paint it all over, and then possibly add some shading with the darker one. sort of first base coat done, and I've added a bit of basic shading just sort of in the obvious areas on his wings and under his chest and the bottom of his tail. So what I'm going to do now is thin down a wash of my darker colour and just lightly wash it all over so that it settles in some of this texture, and just sort of can add a bit more shading, and I can lightly wipe that off any raised areas. So just watering down some of that violet colour, and I'm wondering whether to actually drop in a little bit of this dark green just to darken it even further. And it just needs to be really, really watery. And then I can brush that over the surface. And as you can see, it'll settle in all that detail. Just pick the detail out really well. And then I can go on to highlight the raised areas afterwards once this is dry. So that's added some nice depth to the detail that's on this resin dragon. And what I want to do now is just highlight some of the texture with a paler colour, and I'm going to use like a dry brushing technique for that. So I've washed my brush off, dried my brush off, and I'm going to take the lighter colour of my paint along with a little have a little white as well. I want to lighten it further. I haven't got a great deal of white left in here. I'm just going to mix those together. And for a dry brushing technique, I want very, very little paint at all on my brush. So I'm going to remove most of it onto this piece of paper. And then lightly just flick my brush over the surface. So that it just lands on those high points. And actually lightens it up slightly to highlight it. Just ever so gently with a very small amount of paint. I'm just going to continue doing this until I've covered the whole surface. Now that that's dry, I just want to add a little bit of shimmer to it, and I thought about putting some gilding wax on, but while I was looking through my paints, I've got these, they're called interference paints, and basically they are really a clear paint, but they have an iridescent shimmer, and this one has like a gold shimmer to it. So they come in different colours. I'd got a green one as well, but I'm thinking I'm going to go for the gold. So I'm going to pop just a little bit of that in my palette and lightly brush it all over this dragon, just so that when the light catches it, then it's going to have a nice gold warm shimmer to it. Just give it a bit more of a magical effect. But gilding wax would also, add a real nice metallic shine. So there, as you can see, that gives a really nice effect, and I think that'll work well with the colours that we're putting onto the bottle as well. So now I can just set that aside to dry. I'm in two minds whether to paint the eye in or not. I'm worried that if I paint it in, it's going to look a little bit odd, so I'm thinking about just leaving that as it is. So I'll clear all this out of the way and we'll get on with decorating the bottle itself. So the first thing I'm going to do with the bottle is apply some of these alcohol inks. And as I say, I've got watermelon, cranberry and sunshine yellow. And I've got myself a little felt pad on my applicator. This is just normal craft felt. You can buy the ones that, you know, specifically for these handles, but at the end of the day, it's just felt. So buy a cheap sheet of felt and cut it to size. And what I'm going to do is pop a couple of drops of each of the colours onto my felt pad. And then just using a dabbing motion, apply it to the sides of this bottle where I've got really like a texture. So it'd be the sides and just sort of framing and around the top. And once you're happy with the coverage, you can just set that aside to dry. It doesn't take very long at all, but you're aiming for this nice sort of mottled effect, no hard edges. And I've taken it as far as I can up to the neck of the bottle. As I say, I'm going to wrap some cord around the neck of the bottle, and then there will be that nice ornate metal plaque there as well. So I'm going to take my cord, and as I say, this is just like a nylon cord, but you could use a leather cord, just a cotton, twine. I'm just using what I've got, and I'm going to start it the same way that we did with the vampire bottle. It's a little bit fiddly to do it so that you can see it on camera, but just by tucking an end down the side and then starting to wrap over that, it'll secure that end in place and shouldn't need gluing, and we'll just need to pop a bit of glue at the very end. So I'm going to continue winding this down and possibly back up again, and we've got a couple of ridges to negotiate here, and I'll glue the end in place with a dab of Fabri-Tac glue, and once I've done that I will be back. So there's the twine all wrapped around the top. It's a little untidy, it's not the smoothest surface to cover over, but I'm figuring by the time I've stuck that in place, I'm actually not really going to see much of it. So I'm leaving it as it is. I've popped the cork in with the lights, and so that's all lit up nice and red, and it gives a really cool effect through the coloured glass. So next thing that I need to do, I can just move that out of the way, is my little nameplate. This is just a piece of tea-stained paper that I've got left over from another project. So I'm going to stamp my words onto that and cut it out to fit inside, and just glue it in place, stick it in place, and then I'm going to use my hot glue gun to attach this to the neck of the bottle, and then also use my hot glue gun to attach the dragon. So I shall go away and do that off camera because you don't need to watch me stamping these words, and I'll be back to show you the finished bottle. And here's the finished bottle. Really happy with how this has turned out. Love the way that that dragon's got that gold shine on it and lots of texture. Glad that I didn't do his eye. I'm glad I've left that as it is. All I did here was I popped in a couple of brads. They come with brads in the packet so that you can attach them to things. I didn't like the empty holes, so I've just stuck the brads in there, just glue gunned on, and it hides some of that untidiness around the neck. Really pleased with this coloured glass. Think it's quite effective. So that's our third bottle. I shall clear this away and we'll get ready for the fourth and final one for today. So here we are, ready to decorate our fourth bottle. And this one's going to become our Mermaid's Tears bottle. And for this is an empty bottle that had some cascabel, it's like a coffee liqueur in it. I really like it, nice dumpy shape, heavy, thick, heavy bottom, there's some weight to it. So again, washed out, dried, took the labels off, cleaned it all up, and I'm going to be using that. And as in the previous projects, I've coloured my lights with alcohol inks. And these ones I've coloured blue. And I've actually used two different colours this time. So I've used Mermaid and Sailboat Blue, and that's just given us a little bit of colour variation among the lights. And I thought that might make a nice pleasant change. So those, I put a drop of ink on each of the lights, let that dry, and now they're ready to use. So we'll just put them to one side while we decorate the bottle, and I'll show you the sort of things that I've gathered together for that. Now I want to create a sort of under the sea effect, obviously. If this is going to be Mermaid's Tears, I want it to have a bit of a nautical theme. So I've got some cheesecloth here. Now this was originally white and it's been tea stained. I mean, it's literally just been plunged in a jug of hot tea, left to stew there for a couple of hours, then rinsed out and dried. And it's just added a bit of colour to it, so it's not bright white anymore like it was originally. So I'm going to use a bit of that for some texture on the outside of this bottle to give the effect almost of like sort of fishing nets. As well as that, I've got a selection of beads and charms. Now I've got some different pearl beads here in blues and like an ivory colour. I've also got these sort of iridescent, milky, opalescent beads. And a selection of charms here that I may or may not use. We've got a boat, we've got a ship's anchor, we've got some different sort of starfish in different colours. I've got like a little oyster shell and a life preserver. There's a ship's wheel in there. We've got some little gems that look like shells with like an iridescent finish. I've also got this charm here which has got a quote on it: may you always have a shell in your pocket and sand between your toes. May or may not use that, but all these little sea themed charms were in a pack together, so I've just popped them in here, so I've got a choice to work with. As well as those larger beads, I've also got some smaller ones. So I've got some smaller pearls there. They're just an acrylic bead, but they look a little bit like a freshwater pearl, so I've got those. And I've got this selection of assorted seed beads, which are in sort of turquoise and teal colours, and some clear ones and some gold ones in there as well. And I thought they might be quite nice. I've got a couple of seashells. I used to have more, but they've been used up on other projects, so I may or may not be able to use these as well. And then we've used these pearl art balls before, but I might be using those, I don't know. I've got plenty of beads, but I've just pulled them out. I've got some decorative sand here in like a natural colour. That might be quite nice to add some texture. These little sprinkles look like tiny stone chips. Again, may or may not use those for a bit of texture. And then these are just some like clear dewdrop gems. They're just like a little round gem, just a transparent one. Again, would fit in quite nicely with these beads. May or may not use any or all of those, but I've just gathered them together so I've got them in one place. I've got my gel medium because that's what I'm going to be gluing things on with. And for my label this time, I've got this little square frame it's got some frosted acrylic in there. And I'm thinking I might stamp my words and pop it in that frame and then just attach it. I've got a bit of chain here. Just attach it to this chain and have it hanging around the neck of the bottle attached that way. I think that's what I might do on this one, just to change it up a little bit. So the first thing that I need to do is cut this cheesecloth and apply that, because that's going to be my base, and then I'm going to work on putting the beads and things on top of it. So I'm just having a little think how I'm going to want this to be attached. I'm thinking I kind of want it draping down one side and across a little bit. So this is probably enough for what I need. So I'm just going to roughly hack that off there with the pair of scissors. And it'll be easier to actually position once you put some gel medium on to stick it on, because you can kind of almost mould it. So I think really that's where I'm going to go now. Get the gel medium on the glass and work my cheesecloth into the shape that I want it to be. Now, once again, this dries clear, so, you know, don't worry if you've got any showing. It's not really going to matter. So I'm just going to apply a line just to sort of start with, so that we can begin to get this held in place. And I want some lumps and crinkles. So we can just do this. We can apply a little bit more gel medium through the top. You will get this on your fingers. There's no way around it. This part of the process is quite a messy one. So I'm going to continue popping on some gel medium, being quite generous with it, crinkling up this cheesecloth as we go, and creating our sort of background texture, ready to put the other embellishments on top. Now you can continue adding more embellishments immediately, but I find it a little bit easier to start this off drying, really, just so it doesn't move about so much when we're adding other things to it. So I'm just going to carefully heat this with the heat tool, just to sort of start that drying process off. So as you can see, I mean, it's far from completely dry, but it's sort of enough in place there that it's not going to slip and slide about if we start putting something else on top of it. And the things that we need to put on first really are going to be our bulkiest items, which in this case is going to be these couple of big seashells if I decide to use both of them. And I've picked out here a couple of the bigger charms. Definitely this anchor and these starfish would be going on in the first stage. These ones are a little smaller. I might hang on until I've got some beads on, but I want to get these on first and then probably move on to some of these larger pearl beads. Now to put the seashells on, and probably these. I'm going to be using my hot glue gun because obviously seashells are empty underneath. It's going to be tricky to stick these down with a bit of gel medium. I can put like a big blob of glue just inside of these and get it pressed on, and it'll hold in place. So I just need to decide what's sort of going where. And this one, being quite bulky, I think would fit quite nicely on the shoulder here. So I'm going to pop that one up there. And this one, I think I'm going to fit more down here, trying to work reasonably well with the contours of the bottle. So applying a generous amount of hot glue around the edge here. Doesn't matter if it oozes out, there's going to be beads and things around it, so it will disguise anything that's showing. I'm going to pop that in place on the shoulder of the bottle there, and that fits quite nicely on there. Again, running a line of glue sort of around the edge of this shell. I'm going to pop that like so down there. Take away any of these little stringy bits that form. Never seem to want to go away. So next up, I'm going to take these larger charms, and again just sort of deciding what's going to fit nicely. Using this piece of cheesecloth as the guide, that's where I mainly want to be keeping everything on this cheesecloth. So I'm thinking I'm going to put this anchor in the middle there. And again, because it's a bit of an uneven shape, hot glue is a quick and easy way to attach it. So pressing that in there. And the same with this starfish. Which I want to place down at the front here. I am going to pop these two on next. I'm going to leave those for a little bit longer. So again, just taking a look at what we've got. I'm going to have one of those at the top, I think. And I'm going to place the other one down here near the bottom. So that's my large pieces in place. So next up, I'll say I want to apply some of these larger beads. I'm going to begin that by working around where I've already got these larger embellishments. So just thinking if I can lie this down, it's going to lie down quite well. I'm going to start applying some gel medium. Again, this will dry clear, so no worries about this showing. And then we can begin to press in some of these beads. I'm just going to continue doing this around these larger elements that we've got until I'm happy that I've got enough of this size bead on. So once again, I've got this to a sort of semi-dry stage. That's as many of the larger beads that I want to put on there. And it is still movable, it is still wet, but they're not slip sliding about everywhere. So I'm happy that I can move on to the next stage. And for the next stage, I'm moving on to my slightly smaller embellishments. So that's going to be these other two little charms here. I've got this like an oyster shell and a ship's wheel. I'd got these little iridescent flat-backed seashell gems, so I'm going to use those. And then I've got these little faux freshwater pearls. I'm going to use those. And using the same principle that I just have, working next to where those are, working on my way away from the larger things outwards. Going to apply some gel medium and then tuck in these various beads and embellishments, filling in the space as I go. So once again, I'll just get on with doing that and show you what that looks like when I've finished this stage. And that's my smaller pearls in place. As you can see, just sort of tucked those in and around where we've got the larger things, and those little iridescent shell gems, very pretty as well, got those in there. So I'm looking at what I've got left here in the sort of different textures and beads, and I definitely want to use a little bit of the sand just because I like that sandy texture. I don't think I'm going to use the dewdrops because we've got plenty of pearl beads, so I'm not going to use these little pearl beads either. I don't think I'm even going to use the chips. I'm thinking I might put a few of these seed beads in just because I like the fact that there's some of the metallic colours in there, which might tone quite well with these metal charms that I've got. So again, it's going to be a case of just dotting in some little bits of gel medium where we've got some spaces in and amongst these other beads, and then I'm going to sprinkle on some of these smaller seed beads and sprinkle on some of this sand. So that again is going to be easier for me to do sort of off camera. You're not going to be missing anything. I mean, I am literally just going to paint on a little bit of gel medium, and obviously if you watched the fairy wings video, you'll have seen me sprinkling some sand on over the top. So I'm going to do that with both the sand and these smaller seed beads, and I'll be back to show you what that looks like when that's done. So this is what it looks like now. It's got all the small beads and some sand on there. It's still a little bit damp, which is why I'm giving it a shake and little bits are still dropping off. But I've pretty much filled up all the space with the sand or the tiny seed beads. So I just need to set that aside to dry a little bit more before I handle it. So while I'm waiting, I've stamped my label. Once again, I got a bit of tea-stained paper like we did for the Dragon's Blood bottle. Used my alphabet stamp and some grey ink and stamped the words on there. And I just need to pop this back inside this little frame. The frames are by Ranger, and they have a little tab on the side so you can open them up. So it can be a little fiddly just to make sure I've got both pieces of glass in there. And then this little tab goes through a notch in that side and then just folds down. So there's my sign, my little label that's going to go on. I've got this bit of chain, which I've cut the chain down and joined it with a little ring here. And I'm going to thread the loop on the top of the frame into this little ring just to attach it in place. So now we can just hang that around the neck of the bottle, like so. So I think even though this is still a little bit damp on the outside, we can pop our lights in. So just like we did before, taking out any obvious kinks in the wire as we feed those inside the bottle. And lifting up carefully, just because, as I say, we've still got a bit of damp gel medium. That's pretty much what it's going to look like. Really impressed with that. Love the colours that we've got in those lights. Love all this texture down the side of the bottle. And really happy with a little hanging label this time on it. So that's the final of my projects that I'm doing for this particular video. I'll clear this away and just bring all 4 back into view so that we can take a closer look at them again. So here are our 4 finished projects. We began with the fairy wings in the jar. Really, really pretty. Such a fun idea decorating the lights in this way. Not only did we colour them, but we put those little acetate wings on them. We added a mossy effect at the bottom with some coloured sand, some real reindeer moss and flowers at the top, some beautiful paper flowers, and then draped this delicate chain and pretty little key charms all around the neck of that bottle. Really enjoyed doing that. A lot of fun and very, very, very pretty. Next was a relatively simple make, the Vampire Venom one. We coloured the lights green at the bottom of this vase, wrapped twine and leather cord around for a nice effect, added that simple wooden embellishment with a bit of gilding wax, and then the addition of those shark's teeth to represent the vampire fangs. That was a little fun addition to that project. Next up was the Dragon's Blood bottle. We coloured this resin dragon with acrylic paint. We added that iridescent gold shimmery paint over the top, coloured the lights red, and then added some colour to the bottle itself to even intensify that a bit further. Wrapped that cord around the neck and added a really fancy nameplate at the top. Really enjoyed doing that. That just adds a little bit of something to it. And finally was our Mermaid's Tears. We've got a hanging nameplate this time, draped round on a piece of chain. Blue lights using 2 shades of blue inks in there just for a bit extra effect, and then all this beautiful texture with the pearls and the shells and the beads and the sand. Everything looks as if it's been buried really at the bottom of the ocean for a century or 2. Very, very happy with that, and a very tactile project. Each one's got its own personality, and that's what really impresses me. I'm happy with the scope that you can get just using a simple string of bottle lights. So I want to thank Nina for organising this collaboration and generously sending me some strings of lights to work with. Please do go and check out Nina's channel and go and see what Stephanie and Caroline and Marina have created for this as well. Links to everybody's channel down below, links to the Onforu lights down below. They're available through Amazon in lots of countries, so all the links are going to be there for you if you want to buy a box and have a go at this sort of thing yourself. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, please leave me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.